Hey, it's Luke without a darts. We are back again with another Adventure Force Maxim Pro mod guide. Today what we're going to do is install a pared down version of the Worker Full Auto kit for the Stryfe. Now this is really cool because the blaster is literally set up for this kit right out of the gate. I don't know if Dart Zone did this on purpose because it was a leftover from a previous design, or if they just decided to do this for our sake, but either way, I'm really happy they left it in and didn't get rid of the feature, so those that want to have full auto can. Before we get going any further, I want to mention that this is a LiPo battery upgrade. Please read all the instructions that come with your charger, your battery, and check out our page that we will link down below. LiPo batteries can be dangerous if not handled correctly, so please keep that in mind. We've got a couple different versions of the mod kit on the site. It's worth noting that one is a standard gear motor pusher, which looks like this, and the other is a solenoid pusher, which is our own neutron solenoid. So that's in a separate video. Additionally, we won't cover the actual cage upgrade in this video because I've done that in a separate one. We'll link it down below. Included with the kit, you'll get a yellow 130 gearbox motor. You'll get two of these small 10 amp switches, and these are going to be used for both your return and for your fire trigger now that we're going to go full auto. You'll also get some smaller screws for the switches and a larger screw to go through the actual gear motor. You also get some extra wire, which you will need for this mod, and that's really about it. It's a pretty simple kit. There's more wiring than your standard blaster, of course, because we've got two additional switches from the stock blaster, but relatively straightforward. As far as tools, you're going to want a soldering iron. Helping hands are always helpful. You'll need solder. Don't forget eye protection, a number 1 screwdriver, a number 2 screwdriver, wire strippers, although you can also get by with an X-Acto blade just for stripping wires. X-Acto blade is also helpful on its own to have for this guide. You may want a spudger or other small soft tool to get the blaster open, a pair of needle nose pliers for ripping out plastic, and a snips potentially in case we need to remove any plastic flashing inside. Optionally, you may see me use a driver, but if you just choose to use a driver, please don't use an actual drill. Make sure that yours has low torque settings and is meant for applications like this. Without further ado, let's get going. We're going to start by opening up the blaster. You'll notice this one has a thumb screw on the battery compartment. If you're wondering why I have band-aids, I have both cut myself and went kayaking and gave myself some pretty nasty blisters, so I figured you didn't want to see that on camera. We'll take out our batteries first to get to the screw inside, and we'll go ahead and remove that one screw that's right here. Then we're going to go ahead and remove all of the screws from the blaster. They are all the same size, so you don't have to worry about sorting them or keeping them separate. For the sake of time, I'm going to be using a drill. And we'll go ahead and take our shell apart. We can set this side apart. We won't need this for a little while. In this mod, we are going to leave the front half completely the same. I have another video again covering flywheel cage upgrade and reinstallation. And we're also looking at doing a front muzzle design as well as a 2-stage cage in the near future. So we've got a ton of mods for this. This blaster really is a great platform. You'll notice my backstrap rev has fallen out. I'm going to set that aside as well, along with the lock safety pieces. I'm going to set those aside. I'll show you how to put those back at the end so you won't forget. You'll probably notice this trigger pin fall out. It goes right in here. I'm going to leave it there for the moment, but we will be pulling that out to install the motor. I just want to run over some things inside. So the really neat thing about this blaster is we essentially already have the spot to put a full auto pusher inside. Not only do we have the spot, but it utilizes the same stock pusher. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the stock pusher. And I'll keep that screw close by. And there's a little top piece on there that you don't want to lose either. It helps everything slide nice and smoothly. But you'll notice on this pusher, completely unnecessary, but they've got these nice gears here, and they happen to line up with this sector gear here so that these interface. I swear it's like they must have intended to make this full auto and then decide maybe to cost cut to keep it down to that great $42 price point, which is pretty fantastic. Before we put our gear motor in, we're going to take this arm and we're going to remove this one screw. After that, we're going to drop this down in place, and then we can actually return this little grommet guy here back on top and screw the screw back in that holds that in place. This should slide very freely, nice and easy. Next, we're going to take our gear motor and we're going to drop it in place here. And then we're going to grab these two screws. It's the smallest screw and the longest screw. We're going to put one right here and the other right here, and we can just screw them in place. You may have noticed I actually cracked my part here because I had the wrong torque setting on my driver. So don't do that. At this point, this should not move because your gear motor should be interfacing with it unless it happens to be aligned on the flat side. Now you can take this spring and reattach it to your pusher, just like that. So your pusher will be able to return automatically under spring power. The way this cycle works, a sector gear has gears on about 2/3 or 3/4, and when it hits that spot where there's no gear, that allows it to return. So it pushes it forward, hits the flat spot on the gear, and then the spring returns it to the back. For the purposes of this video, we're gonna leave this backstrap rev that comes with the blaster. However, I did design a backstrap delete that goes right in here and locks in place. Completely gets rid of that, it goes flush with the blaster, and then a switch plate that allows you to add a second switch down here, which then allows you to have a 2-stage trigger. Now, I will cover this in a separate video, but it is compatible with this mod. Now we're gonna place our 2 switches. There's one that goes up here, that's our return switch, and one down here, that's our trigger switch. So the trigger switch is gonna go right here, just like that, and the return switch is gonna be similar up in this corner, just like that. And we're gonna put 4 screws to hold those in place. At this point, the top rail is actually getting in my way a little bit. I'm gonna pop it over like that and see if I can get away with that. Otherwise, you could remove it, but it requires loosening the cage up front. It's worth mentioning here that you're gonna wanna make sure that these 2 wires go around this back screw post, and there's a little spot for them to go through. I don't know if we moved this one or what happened, but this ended up slightly in the wrong spot. But you'll see there's a little wire trap there that should be holding. So I'm just gonna kind of play with all those wires until I get them in where I want, because we want to keep them away from our switch activation. So your wire path should look like that on the stock wires before you begin. Now I'm gonna go ahead and take my prepared switch and drop it in place back here. You will have to depress the lever as you screw the screws in. So your switches should look like this. You've got your return switch that depresses every time and indicates that this is all the way back for the circuit, and you've got your firing switch, which if you activate this here, your safety, you should now be able to feel it. We're gonna start by wiring our pusher motor, but I did wanna mention this PWM and or the step down module that's included with some kits. This goes literally in line right before your pusher motor and can be added to any of these circuits. Now I'm not gonna cover this in here, but I do think with some finagling and some finesse, that could sit in there and stick out of the battery door. We might look at offering a different battery door with a pre-made hole for this that you drill through, but I want more testing and time with that before I consider it. But this could sit in there, or the step-down module can fit in this space. Again, it's not required, but you can use it optionally, and it's really obvious. It's just DC in, so you take your 2 lines into here and motor out 2 lines to the motor. So it should be pretty easy to wire, but we're gonna omit this for today. Now it's time to get soldering. So go ahead and put on your safety glasses and heat your soldering iron up. We're gonna start with the pusher motor, and we're gonna grab our 2 lengths of wire, red representing positive and the white here is going to be negative. I'm keeping some different colors here just to make the tutorial a little more clear. You don't necessarily need any specific color. It's just nice to keep red always positive and black always negative, of course. So the bottom terminal is going to be the positive, so we're gonna go ahead and wire that in first. Then we're gonna take our longer black or white cord, or wire rather, and we're gonna put that into the top terminal, the negative. And don't do what I did. I put a little hole in my top rail there. That's all right, stuff does happen. It's so hard to have a camera here, and I normally would solder straight down, but straight down blocks your view, so we make some mistakes here too. And then I'm gonna first take my black wire, or the white wire in this case, my negative, and I'm gonna follow that down so that through those same wire channels. And we're gonna attach this to the middle terminal, or the normally open terminal on my return switch. So we're just gonna kind of curve this in, and we'll cut that a little bit shorter to make sure that we don't have a ton of extra slack, because it could get in the way of our pusher later, or just be a pain to manage in general. I will use my helping hands again. If you're one of those people that has 3 hands, you don't need helping hands. I thought about that the other day. What would be my superhero power, my nerf superpower? And it would be, I want like 5 hands. 5 hands and 5 arms. They'd be like little baby arms that come out of the front of me. Is that a little weird? And then after that's done, we'll just tuck that kind of down and out of the way, hopefully. Next, we'll take our positive wire. We're gonna run it the same way we ran the negative. I've actually decided to route this around here. I'm pretty sure that's what they intended, since there's a nice channel there. And then we are going to connect that to the top terminal here. So I'm just gonna snip this short enough to solder it. And just note that you're gonna see this out of place in the next shot or 2, and then it's gonna disappear and fix itself. So ignore anything wrong with this in the next few shots. You shouldn't be trying to match by picture. You should be going step by step or looking at the diagram. With so many wires the same color, it's really hard to tell what's going to what. Now I'm going to take one of these small folded wires, or about a 4-inch piece, 5-inch piece, and we're going to go from the top terminal of this switch to the bottom terminal of this switch. This is not one I'd want to do without helping hands. It's a lot easier to have something holding these joints for you. And then we're going to work that same wire path, and we're connecting to the top up here. I think in this case, since I've got room in the stock, I'm just going to keep this the length it is, just in case. But you could shorten it per your preference, of course. And so I'm attaching this to the top terminal there. You can come at these from any angle. It's just important to keep everything tidy so you don't have wires touching or terminals touching together. I like to give my wire a little tug to make sure that it's holding on well, and I'll tuck any excess wire for this part of the circuit back there. Next, we're going to connect the negative power lead from our battery connector to the center terminal. Now you can do this two ways. You can see I've got the white wire running here. You can literally splice right here and solder those two together, or you can run a separate wire here and splice in on the red wire. Either will work totally fine. It's functionally the same. So what I'm going to do is I'll just bridge from here up to this part here. So I'll take this small piece here, and we'll first just add it into the middle switch terminal there. And then I'll go ahead and splice in line on the black main power lead. Sometimes this kind of splice can actually be, if you're having a hard time getting at it, just a little bit of cutting with an X-Acto knife and then use your fingernail to spread. Now, since we're doing this in the middle of pre-existing wiring, we're not going to be able to put any heat shrink on here. You could wrap it in black electrical tape or, some other type of heat shrink, but I like to wrap it around physically so it's going to hold on strong, and then we'll go ahead and solder together. Now we're going to solder from the normally closed, the bottom terminal of this top switch, to the normally open, the middle terminal of your firing switch, to the top terminal here, number 1 on your original switch. So I'm going to start down from the bottom here, and I want this to run underneath the switch. So we're going to take our wire and we're going to shove it under, and we'll grab that with our needle nose and pull that through, and then I'm going to flip this around like that to solder. And again, I'll use my helping hands to connect that in. We want this to be pretty low profile so it doesn't get into any trouble with any other shell pieces or anything like that. So if you can do it kind of as I have it pictured there, where it's poking up from the bottom, that's ideal. Keep routing this up, same direction, and we're going to splice it in the middle for this middle terminal. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of mock that up roughly. We do know that this trigger switch has got to slide, so you really do got to watch that these 3 wires are completely flush and as flat as possible. I'm going to kind of hold this up so you can see that they should go through that terminal and they should not stick above it. Now, if you have problems with this not staying put where you want, we can always hold it down and shove a little hot glue in here at the end and then trap the wire. But you want to make sure that when you've got that wire in place, this can fit just fine, nice and smooth, not hitting your wires. Then I'm going to go ahead and just mark this where I want to splice it. Going to kind of pull that open. And in situations like this, I like to take the wire itself and actually split it open slightly. And we're actually going to shove that onto that terminal. It can make it a lot easier to actually solder that in my opinion. You can just kind of loop it around or just turn it, or you could solder 2 different wires if you prefer to break these wires. But anytime I'm doing a pass-through connection, I will always favor keeping the strands of wire intact. I'll go ahead and solder that in. And again, we're going to tuck those wires down in. Oh, see there I'm jamming a little bit. So I will definitely at the end come in here with a screwdriver, hold that down, and we'll put some hot glue at the end just to keep that totally clean, because we do not want that interfering with our trigger. Next, we're going to take this, we're going to follow our crazy wire path here again, back through the back, and then we're going to attach to that last terminal right there, the bottom terminal, or the normally closed on that switch. So I didn't do a great job with that last switch there, but no one's ever perfect, and doing things on camera can be tricky. But at this point, we've fully wired our blaster, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in a test pack. This thing that comes with the blaster is so helpful and useful for future use because these can only deliver about 1 amp at a time. If you've got something wrong in your wiring, you're far less likely to damage a pusher motor or a flywheel or burn something out because of this. So this is super, super cool to have around. I keep these and use them all the time. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug in. I suspect it's going to return that right away. Let's see what happens. That's a good sign. Probably be a little bit easier if I stick in our backstrap rev, which unlocks that trigger. Full on runaway, okay. So we're diagnosing and we're noticing that it's going into runaway, and the reason it is because this is not in its full place and home and it's missing that switch. The way the circuit works is that if that is not depressed back there, the motor will continue to run until that is depressed completely. Once we install the other side of the shell, we'll have the rest of the guide. You'll notice that this part right here perfectly lines up with that pusher. I may even put a few drops of silicone lubricant in here just to make sure it's extra smooth, since there was a little bit of lube from the factory, but most of that has come off on my fingers. But at this point, we can actually go ahead and close it up. So I'm gonna show you how to put all the parts back that were stock that we took out. Starting with the bottom mag release, which is the one you care about. This is the one for talons. There is a top mag release here. I'm choosing not to put it in because I'm not gonna use anything that's not a talon or talon compatible. So you can basically leave that alone. Here we've got our mag release. We've got a mag release that Perry designed that's actually extends it so your middle finger on your firing hand can use it. So that's a 3D printed item we've got on the shop as well. We've of course got our back strap plugged back in here. And at this point, I'm definitely feeling a little nervous about that wire. I don't want that wire popping up and causing me issues later. So what I'll do is I'll take a spudger or any other item you've got and just hold that down kind of on the edge there. And I'm just gonna put enough hot glue down there to trap it. I'd love to hear from you if you've got another way you like to do this kind of thing versus hot glue. I'm a real big fan of high temp hot glue. I think we demonize it a little bit too much. It's really useful for so much things, especially if you're just doing a mod that's a one-off. This whole area next to my #1 screwdriver here essentially needs to be flat and flush below this little shelf here. So we want to kind of hold that in place, make sure that's good. And I'm going to put some down here as well, just to further ensure that we don't have any issues later. Hot glue doesn't always like to stick, of course, to this, but you essentially can trap it by having it stick to everything around the wire. The silicone wire isn't very sticky when it comes to the glue itself. I'm sure someone that knows a little bit more about material science could tell me why silicone doesn't want to attach to hot glue. If you know, that would be a very cool comment. We do try to read as many comments as possible. I'd love to hear why that is. I mean, I know I could go look that up, but my hands are full. Now that we've got that tested, that's feeling pretty good. Then we are gonna go ahead and replace the safety down at the bottom. And since we've left that intact, this should all still work. And this piece you should have sitting out because you've replaced it. It no longer functions, and there is no way to make this also work. It would be very bad, so don't leave this in. You wanna replace any popped out parts as they jump out at you. That's like half the nerf modding is just springs flying, pretty much. Then don't forget to put your top rail back in place. Double checking that your wires aren't getting pinched up at the top, that everything's got plenty of room. You should be able to see that these aren't sitting on top of any wires. At this point, you should have nothing in your hand other than that piece I threw away. And we're gonna go ahead and we can actually put our shell back together. This can be a little difficult at times, but it looks like we've done pretty well. I don't see anything that's pinching any wires. Now that we've got that all together, I'm gonna make sure that the pusher is functioning as expected. So I'll go ahead and plug this battery in, and there we heard it reset. That's a good sign. Very nice, we are functioning as expected. The rate of fire will be higher on a LiPo. Let's do a quick LiPo demo. Again, with a LiPo, you should always be using an alarm. I know this one's fully charged and I'm gonna unplug it immediately. So here we can hear it rev up on normal. This is still the stock flywheel, so keep that in mind. Boy, does that thing scream. I'd say that's probably shooting a comfortable 6 rounds a second, 7 rounds a second. It's a pretty good rate of fire. It's very controllable. And that's pretty much it. At this point, we can go ahead and put all of our screws back in. Everybody's least favorite modding task is finding all the screws that you know you had at one point. Last thing's to replace your battery door and you are good to go. You have a full auto Adventure Force Maxim Pro. I really like this blaster. In case you're interested, here's a few of the other accessories that we are gonna have. We have a flared magwell coming. We have a single and a dual stage cage. We have an expanded battery door as well as a flush battery door. We have a backstrap rev delete, and we have a switch plate to do a 2-stage trigger. So you can remove this and have this actuate partial and all the way. And then we'll probably do a plug to plug this up after you do the backstrap rev, because at that point, this doesn't do anything. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, we'll have several other videos. This is number 2 of at least 3, probably 4 videos on mod guides for this blaster specifically. Until next time, I'm out of darts.